Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 7, Structure, Function and Neo-Functionalism. We are continuing our topic, Criticisms of Functionalism. The functionalists search for order led by them to lend justification to the existing norms and values, ideological and hierarchical structures, institutions, and rules of power distribution prevalent in a society. They did not realize, as Marxists had done, that the normative system in a society was a creation of ruling elite, and there may be several opposing forces to it. By looking for order, they in fact were justifying the system, the established order, and thus were helping in maintenance of the status quo. Functionalism was charged for supporting the dominant elite and the system as it was. In addition to these, there were some important methodological and logical criticisms of functionalism. The belief of functionalism that there is a single theory that could be used in all situations was an illusion. Many scholars found that it was difficult to apply functionalism to complex societies, which were not only fast changing but were also conflict ridden. The ideas of relativism, that is, the things are meaningful in their respective cultural context to which functionalists gave support, made a comparative analysis difficult. If things can only be understood in the context of the social system of which they are a part, then how can we compare it with the similar things in other systems? If polyandry, for example, makes sense in the context of the community of the Todas, how can we compare it with the polyandry in Johnson Bevar? Some scholars have tried to deal with this matter of the lack of comparability in the functionalism. Walter Goldsmith has argued in favor of an approach he has called comparative functionalism. According to this approach, there is a universality of functions to which institutions are a response. All cultures require the same functions, however, the institutions that fulfill these functions vary from one society to another. One of the important criticisms of functionalism is that it is inherently teleological, that is, explanations are given in terms of purposes or goals. With respect to this, Turner and Mariansky submit that the teleology per se is not a problem. As a matter of fact, social theory should take into account the teleological relationship between society and its component parts. The problem comes when teleology is stretched to unacceptable limits, when it is believed that only the given and specific part of the society can fulfill the needs. Teleology becomes illegitimate when it fails to take into consideration the idea that a variety of alternative structures can fulfill the same needs. Why certain structures come up and why certain structures become irreplaceable needs to be explained. The later functionalists such as the Parsons and the Merton were aware of this problem and in their own ways tried to overcome it. Merton, for example, proposes the concept of functional alternatives. In his analysis of the family system, Parsons was able to show that in the contemporary industrial society, nuclear family performed the function of primary socialization and the stabilization of adult personality, and no other institution could carry them out. These functions were not transferable to any other institutions. Functionalism has also been criticized for making explicit what is implicit in the premise. The technological term used for this kind of reasoning is tautology. For example, if religion exists, it must be functional, otherwise it will cease to exist. And its function must be to contribute to the social solidarity, because without it society will not be able to survive. Many critics have pointed out that the functionalism suffers from globular or circular reasoning. Needs are postulated on the basis of the existing institutions that are in turn used to explain their existence. For instance, society as a social fact explains the division of labor, and in turn division of labor contributes to the maintenance of solidarity in society. What is happening here is that the whole is being defined in terms of its part, and then parts are being defined in terms of the whole. Because one is being defined in terms of others, in fact none of them, neither the whole nor its parts, is actually being defined. As we noted earlier, here also there is a debate whether tautology is inherent in the theory or has come into existence because of the deeds of its practitioners. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning Podcast.